Every winter across the globe, millions of homes light up with Christmas trees, glittering evergreens decked with lights and ornaments. But have you ever wondered why a tree? Like, where did this tradition come from? And how did a simple fir evolve into one of the most universal symbols of the holiday season? In today's video, we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the Christmas tree's journey from across the ancient solstice rituals through medieval mystery plays to even royal courts and immigrant traditions that brought to life our modern day understandings of the Christmas tree. This video was brought to you by Dubby. Yes, the Occultorium Historian has its first sponsor. Be sure to click the link in the description below, enter code OHistorian to get 10% off. Happy holidays! Hey there, I'm Sapphire, your Occultorium Historian, and today's story begins well long before Christmas. The arrival of winter in many ancient cultures had evergreens that were plants that held special meaning during the darkest and coldest time of the year. Because these trees stayed green even through the harshest of winters, they came to symbolize life, hope, renewal, and yes, a promise that spring would come again. Two great examples that I can think of through my research that I've been doing is that of the ancient Egyptians and Northern European Celtic and Norse traditions. So, ancient Egyptians, funny enough, actually used evergreens to signify the return of life and the days that would lengthen after the solstice. They would also use them in wartime rituals and decorations. Within Northern Europe, pagan and pre-Christian cultures, often including the tribes associated with the Celts and the Vikings, used evergreen boughs in winter rites, often hanging them in their homes and temples to ward off evil and celebrate the endurance of life through the winter darkness. So these practices of decorating with greenery around the winter solstice do predate Christmas as we know it, and they've been interpreted and pulled into the Christmas tradition through the Christianization of the pagan world throughout Europe. This is symbolic groundwork for what we have today, and we aren't removed from the past, and in fact, the past has kind of morphed into what we do now. As Europe Christianized, many old winter customs were transformed and even reinterpreted and absorbed into the faith and traditions. One of the most important adaptations that took place within medieval Germany, where Christians began using evergreens for religious drama and devotional symbolism. So, these are the mystery plays. Theatrical representations of biblical stories that would be retold through the understandings of those who lived in their own region. A fir or evergreen tree was used to represent the tree of paradise, which is a biblical tree from the Garden of Eden. These trees were often decorated with apples to symbolize the forbidden fruit, and later wafers representing the Eucharist host. Over time, these paradise trees moved out of the churches and play stages and into homes, especially around December 24th. So, at this point, I kept talking for another 15 minutes and did not realize that my microphone had cut off. And, of course, I did not realize this until just right now, while I'm editing, on Saturday, when you're supposed to be watching this video. So, the rest of this is going to be voiceover because I have been sick all week. Bear with me. The modern Christmas tree is more recognizably emerging within Germany during the late medieval to early modern period. By the 16th century, devout Christians within German territories were bringing evergreen trees into their homes, especially at Christmas.
It became a tradition that would eventually evolve significantly into what we have today. Now, there is a pretty big legend surrounding the Christmas tree, and it's highly debated amongst historians, folklorists, and even regionally. But it basically, to sum it all up, in the 16th century, reformer Martin Luther may have been the very first person to add lighted candles to a tree. The story goes that as he was walking home one very cold, very snowy winter evening, he was struck by how beautiful the stars twinkled through the evergreen branches on his way home. He decided that he was going to recreate the magical scene for his family, and he placed throughout his tree and his home lit candles. Meanwhile, the Evergreen Christmas Pyramid, it's a triangular wooden structure that's adorned with evergreen sprigs, candles, and figurines, also was becoming popular. By the 17th and 18th centuries, in many German-speaking regions, the Christmas tree, which was decorated with fruit, baked goods, and candlelights at this point, had become a meaningful staple of cultural and religious blends during the seasonal time. What had once been a theatrical or symbolic thing was now just becoming more domestic and mundane. Now, the late 19th century definitely got to see a big shift in the Christmas tree as it escaped its German heartland and spread across Europe, and eventually made its way across the Atlantic to here to the Americas. There's two major events that drove this spread: royal example and immigration. Queen Victoria and her husband, Albert, had a huge impact on the modern Christmas tree. And if you don't believe me, one of my most favorite podcasts that I listen to, called The Gas Lamp Historian, you need to listen to him. He did a whole episode on this a while back, and it is, yes, the inspiration for this video today. So in Britain, evergreen decorations had been used in various forms in the past during the winter solstice. The Christmas tree became widely popular after Queen Victoria and her German-born husband, Prince Albert, set up and decorated a Christmas tree at Windsor in the 1840s. There is a very famous 1848 illustration of the royal family standing around the tree. It was published in the Illustrated London News, and it made the image fashionable, and all of a sudden, upper and middle class British families followed suit. According to some sources that I have found, by the early 19th century, Christmas greenery and modest trees were already occasionally used in Britain, but at the time of the royal endorsement, the Christmas tree boomed in mainstream holiday symbols. The Christmas tree was brought to the Americas by German settlers and immigrants. Pennsylvania was a big location for German American communities, and they were already cutting trees and decorating them by the 1820s. As late as the 1840s, many Americans at that point, especially within the New England region, still regarded Christmas as an associated celebration with high superstition, thanks to a lot of Puritan roots that disfavored festive decorations. But then you have the areas such as Pennsylvania, Virginia, and even as south as North Carolina, where Quakers lived. They brought with them the traditions of Christmas trees. I will say, by the 1870s, the Christmas tree had become a very firm, established tradition in most American homes. Trees ranged from small tabletop ones to full floor-to-ceiling evergreens. And if you had enough money, you had one in every room. By the mid to late 19th century, what had been once a regional German tradition had now morphed into international phenomenon, and a lot of it was thanks to the royal example. Now we get to our modern era, the 20th and 21st centuries. The Christmas tree is so different, and it has morphed into something beyond what I think any 17th century common person would ever think it would be, in form, materials, and even meaning. It's become a fixture not just in private homes, but in public spaces, global culture, and most definitely commercial economies. So, by the 1800s, there were already glass ornaments in manufacturing. Many were imported from Germany. Obviously, they were handmade. There wasn't a whole lot of machinery that could blow the glass, so they would have to do it by hand. This began appearing in Britain and America, and it replaced, or at least supplemented, the traditional edible decorations. Artificial Christmas trees, surprisingly enough, started to appear as early as the 1880s within America. Originally, they were fashioned to preserve trees and forests, but over time, they've evolved from these very rudimentary bristle trees that almost look like brooms into very sophisticated artificial firs that you can see at any Walmart, Home Depot, or Lowe's, or even at the Dollar General now. The 20th century also saw a very big rise in public Christmas tree displays. A notable example, the famous Rockefeller Center in New York City, which began its tradition in 1931. A humble tree placed by a construction worker that has today turned into the Rockefeller Center tree as a global symbol of holiday festivity and draws a huge public interest every year. Meanwhile, the customs of decorating evergreen trees has spread beyond its European and North American roots. Today, people around the world, even in places without snowy winters, embrace the Christmas tree as a symbol of the holiday season. The form of the tree adapts, real or artificial, and it can morph and change depending on the needs and even religious beliefs of those who have it in their house. I've seen trees with Judaic symbolism, I've seen trees with Kwanzaa, I've seen trees with secular, I've seen trees that are just Yuletide trees like our house, where we decorate with a lot of edible ornaments and handmade things. It's become from this medieval symbolism of faith to a modern symbolism of tradition and family and remembering those that came before us, whether we acknowledge that out loud or not.